Hello, my name is Anthony Tran, and welcome back to the Unknown Military History Podcast. This episode will discuss what came to be known as the First War of the Diadochi, as Alexander's loyal generals, men who had fought side by side from Issus to India, now turned on each other. Now picture yourself in 322 BC, somewhere in the vast Macedonian Empire. During the Lamian War that was discussed in the previous episode, we mostly skipped over events that occurred in other parts of the empire. While Antipater and Craterus were busy quelling the major Greek rebellion, there was another rebellion happening another world away in Bactria. There, Greek settlers rebelled against Perdiccas and threatened to march west. However, one of Perdiccas' generals, Python, arrived east with a force and suppressed the uprising before it could become a major threat. Meanwhile, Perdiccas, who was in effect the ruler of the empire, sent Alexander's former secretary Eumenes to take Cappadocia, which still had elements of Persian resistance. With all of this unrest quelled by Macedonian might, it seems as if Perdiccas had finally consolidated his position as regent until Alexander IV would come of age. He was betrothed to the daughter of Antipater, the regent in Greece, and this new alliance between the former Alexander's two most powerful men would seem to have been fruitful. However, this would all come crashing down. What Antipater didn't know was that Perdiccas had secretly been making plans to marry Cleopatra, not the famous one, but the sister of Alexander the Great. In doing so, Perdiccas would not have to be a regent and give up his title once Alexander's son came of age. He could claim the Macedonian throne for himself. If this became known, however, the other satraps and generals would not accept this and would do anything in their power to stop this from happening. Many generals envied and resented the growing power and influence of Perdiccas, some even feeling threatened by him. In the meantime, Perdiccas sent a secret letter to Cleopatra. In this letter, he told her that he intended to marry her, not Antipater's daughter, and that he would divorce Antipater's daughter once the marriage had formally occurred. Then, he sends an undercover messenger to Greece. However, along the way, this messenger was stopped in Phrygia, modern-day Turkey. The messenger was then brought before the governor, Antigonus the One-Eyed, who seized the letter and its information. Antigonus was an ambitious and brave general who had fought for Macedon since the days of Alexander's father Philip. He had earned his epithet the One-Eyed after he was struck by a catapult bolt in the eye during the siege of Perdiccas. His abilities for generalship and management were recognized by Alexander during his Persian campaign, and he was appointed the governor of Phrygia. Antigonus, who hated Perdiccas, now saw his chance to remove him from power. Antigonus relayed this message to the other generals. He then consummated a coalition with Antipater and Craterus against Perdiccas. Not long after, Antigonus's forces were mustered and combined with that of Antipater and Craterus, getting ready to revolt against Perdiccas. Meanwhile, Perdiccas had sent the body of Alexander the Great on the road to the Greek mainland under escort. However, word of the dead Alexander's whereabouts soon reached Ptolemy while it was passing through Syria. Ptolemy, the governor of Egypt, had been close to Alexander since they were boys and had fought by his side through many of his battles. Ptolemy bribed the escort, seizing the body, bringing it to Egypt where it was housed in Memphis. I would like to think that Ptolemy's actions may have been in direct coordination with Antigonus and his allies to divert Perdiccas' attention from them while they readied their armies for war. Whatever the overall strategy seemed to have been for the anti-Perdiccas coalition, it would not change the fact that following the capture of Alexander's body by Ptolemy, Perdiccas would decide to march an army into Egypt and confront him. Despite minimal resistance at first, Perdiccas would find himself bogged down by garrisons along the Nile River, which he intended to cross to get into the heartland of Egypt. Eventually, Perdiccas was able to find a suitable point, a ford, which would lead to several key cities on the other side of the Nile. Besieging the fort along this spot, Perdiccas expected an easy victory. However, the defenders of the fort, known as the Camel's Rampart, bogged Perdiccas' forces down. After weeks of trying and failing to take the fort, Perdiccas would order his war elephants and silver shield infantry to attack. The silver shields were the elite pikemen, veterans of Alexander's conquests. However, a fort under Ptolemy soon arrived to reinforce the fortress, and Perdiccas was forced to retreat to avoid being overwhelmed by superior numbers. In doing so, Perdiccas was forced to find another river crossing. Finding one near Memphis, he led his army across the river, but the water soon became deeper due to the tides, and many of his soldiers drowned. Perdiccas' invasion of Egypt was a complete failure, and this would be his undoing. In the aftermath of the retreat, a large mutiny occurred among Perdiccas' troops. Despite efforts taken by Perdiccas to maintain cohesion in his army, a conspiracy soon started. This conspiracy was led by three of Perdiccas' generals: Python, the satrap of Media and bodyguard of Alexander; Antigenes, commander of the Silver Shields; and Seleucus, commander of the Companions. These officers, along with a number of disgruntled soldiers, eventually tracked down and murdered Perdiccas, regent of the Macedonian Empire and a possible claimant to the throne. As all of this unfolded around Egypt, a battle was being fought in Anatolia against Perdiccas' regime. Craterus had marched against Perdiccas after crossing the Hellespont. Prior to Perdiccas' murder, he had sent Eumenes to stop the advance of Craterus. Eumenes had been Alexander's trusted secretary. He had now taken on the role of a general in the field, given a force by Perdiccas to command alongside the satrap of Armenia, Neoptolemus. Eumenes' army would soon meet an equal number of soldiers under Craterus at the Battle of the Hellespont. However, before the battle, Neoptolemus deserted Eumenes with a few hundred cavalry and joined Craterus' forces. While the sources are shady on the reasons for Neoptolemus' betrayal, it is likely because he was jealous of Eumenes. Both forces had around 20,000 infantry, though Craterus' men were of higher quality due to their experience in the Lamian War. On the other hand, Eumenes had a higher number of cavalry, which was commanded by two Persians named Pharnabazus III of Phrygia and Phoenix of Tenedos. Both Eumenes and Craterus stationed their phalanx in the center and the cavalry on the right and left wings. As typical of the Macedonian fashion, Craterus and Eumenes commanded the right-wing infantry. The battle began with a typical phalanx engagement. As the two sides clashed, Eumenes sent his Persian cavalry to charge against Craterus' regiment. Craterus' regiment was unable to withstand the shock of the cavalry charge, and Craterus was killed. Meanwhile, Neoptolemus' cavalry engaged with the right wing of Eumenes. Challenging him to single combat, Neoptolemus fought Eumenes fiercely, but to no avail, and in the duel, Eumenes killed Neoptolemus, who had betrayed him. After this, the leaderless army scattered, and the enemy infantry surrendered to Eumenes. Eumenes had proven himself an able commander on the field, defeating one of Alexander's hardened veteran commanders only his first command. However, he was unable to contain his Macedonian prisoners who escaped at night and rejoined Antipater in Greece. Eumenes would soon receive news of the death of Perdiccas, which ended the legitimacy of his cause. In the meantime, Ptolemy, Antipater, and Antigonus signed the Treaty of Triparadisus following Perdiccas' death. The terms of this treaty gave Antipater the position of the new regent, while Antigonus was given the title Strategos of Asia. Ptolemy retained Egypt, Lysimachus retained Thrace, while Perdiccas' assassins were given provinces of their own, most notably Seleucus, who received Babylon. However, the real power laid in the hands of Antipater and Antigonus, who de facto ruled mainland Greece and Asia, respectively. However, the victorious Eumenes was still at large with a hardened army in Asia, alongside four other of the late Perdiccas' generals: Alcetus, Attalus, Dokimos, and Polion. Due to the fact that Antigonus was now the ruler of Asia, it was his job to take them down. The ambitious one-eyed Antigonus now readied his forces to face Eumenes of Cardia. Taking command of the royal army itself, as well as being reinforced by Antipater's forces, Antigonus moved against Eumenes, who was residing in the province of Cappadocia. While it may seem that Antigonus had the upper hand in this matter, this was actually not the case. Antigonus was forced to lead his army alone, while 5 capable enemy generals were on the loose in Asia. This is shown as Antigonus was forced to leave a large part of his army behind to defend against Alcetus, who was residing in Pisidia in his rear. In the end, Antigonus was able to field 10,000 Macedonian pikemen, 2,000 infantry, and 30 war elephants against Eumenes, who had taken twice the amount of infantry and 5,000 cavalry. Antigonus was heavily outnumbered and facing a capable general who had proven himself against Craterus by vanquishing his forces only recently. The two forces arrived at Orcynia. Eumenes placed his forces on a plain which would be better for the movement of his superior cavalry. However, Antigonus countered this move by camping on a hill. For a time, the two forces stood firm, neither side beginning the battle. However, one night, Antigonus would receive a message that may have turned the tide of the battle. A cavalry commander under Eumenes by the name of Apollonides approached the campsite of Antigonus, offering to switch sides alongside his men. Though the strategic Antigonus was skeptical at first, he eventually agreed to the deal, as Apollonides was not on friendly terms with Eumenes. The next day, Antigonus would lengthen his line of pikemen. This tricked Eumenes into thinking that Antigonus had twice as much infantry as he actually had. Taken by surprise, Eumenes was unable to react quickly, as Antigonus' infantry smashed through his lines despite few in number, and Apollonides' cavalry betrayed Eumenes in the midst of the battle. Eumenes would lose 8,000 men in the Battle of Orcynia, but would escape himself with much of his army still intact. He evaded the forces of Antigonus and even managed to kill the traitor Apollonides. After burying the dead, Eumenes sought refuge in a fortress called Nora. It was there that Antigonus besieged him. However, Antigonus would be forced to abandon the siege, as he had to deal with the other 4 enemy generals, Alcetus, Attalus, Docimos, and Polemon. In the time that Antigonus had pursued Eumenes, the other 4 generals had mustered their forces in the pass of Cretopolis, a good distance away from Antigonus' forces. Realizing that he needed a quick victory so he could get back to take down Eumenes, Antigonus' force marched his troops for a whole week towards Cretopolis, a distance of about 300 miles. When his war elephants began to trumpet on the hills overlooking the regiments of Alcetus, the Perdiccans must have been surprised that he had arrived so quickly. In a state of panic, Alcetus led his cavalry and peltasts to try and dislodge Antigonus' forces from the ridge. However, this failed completely and allowed Antigonus to outflank Alcetus with 6,000 cavalry, killing most of his men and leaving Alcetus to flee from the site of the battle. In the meantime, chaos ensued as the other generals could not draw their phalanx up, and seeing Antigonus' forces surrounding them, they surrendered. In the aftermath of this battle, Antigonus would learn that Alcetus had committed suicide in Termessos after its inhabitants planned to hand him over. Meanwhile, Antigonus stood victorious in 2 successive battles, cementing his position as ruler of Asia. He had also gained a substantial amount of 16,000 new soldiers following the Battle of Cretopolis. Perdiccas and his faction were now either completely destroyed or scattered, with little to no support thanks to the efforts of Antigonus. While one might have hoped this would be the end, it was only the beginning though, as the redoubtable Eumenes of Cardia and his large army were still on the run in Antigonus' territory. And this will conclude the First War of the Diadochi, a war which saw a number of men rise from relative obscurity to become rulers and great generals, from Alexander's secretary Eumenes to the one-eyed governor Antigonus. However, this war also saw the deaths of some of the most important men in the fractured empire, from the regent Perdiccas to Alexander's former bodyguard and top general Craterus. And as the pendulum of history continues to swing, more men will take up the sword to fight for an empire already crumbling. With that, I thank you for watching this episode of Unknown Military History. My name is Anthony Tran, and I'm signing off. Till next time.